Story 1. Haunted. The human body is made up of electrical activity. Electrical activity equals life. Energy can never be destroyed, only converted. When someone does something enough times in their life, and then their life ends in trauma or rather dramatically, it leaves an impression on the atmosphere where it happened. People who are sensitive to this energy can sense it. I've always been sensitive to these energies, and even when my grandmother died and came to me in the bathroom to tell me to take care of my mom, just before the phone rang, where they were going to tell us that she had died. So I guess that's my explanation to things that I've seen or felt or experienced over the years, and for what others have saw and told me. The first place I worked as an aide had been the county poorhouse. A couple 100 years of living and dying had happened there. The old home is now the Historical Society and is open to the public. There's one building that's named the Asylum. Our county disaster services agency had some stuff stored there. I belonged to that unit. I always hated going anywhere near that building, especially if it was near dark. You could feel the confusion, hate, anger, and even in the light, you could see shadows of things that weren't there. The new home was built, and all was moved just down the road. Back in the 1970s, I started working there as an aide when I turned 18. And even though I left there several times, I still work there as a restorative RN now. When I first worked there was an LPN that had some of the best stories. Some of the things that she said would curl your hair, but I always thought they were just that, stories. Boy, was I wrong. Even though the home was newly built and on farmland, all of the residents, and I think probably some of the energy had moved with them from the old building. The weirdest things happened there. One night I was working one section, and one of our residents died. A friend and I were cleaning him up, preparing him for the funeral home. The light above the sink started to go on and off by itself. Not only was the light turning on and off, but the switch was moving from the on to the off position over and over. I got out of that room as fast as I could. Another night, I was on the other end, and we had 3 gentlemen in the ward, all who were there for the same illness. A few rooms down was a woman that we were expecting to die, and she did so. That very minute, one of the men on the ward sat up and started talking perfectly. He hadn't done that since he had got there. He asked some questions and then went back to sleep. The couple across the hall from them had a clock radio that the alarm had not worked in a long time, but they kept it because the radio was perfect. At that same time, the alarm went off and stayed on until we went to check on them. My grandmother, she lived in one of those old mansion homes. She could tell you tales that would send shivers up your spine. I worked there as an ER charge nurse just before they built a new nursing home and tore that old mansion house to the ground. Those energies from that old building, they moved to the new building faster than we could. Call lights would go on and off, as would lights. Keys locking themselves in rooms. The new building was equipped with surveillance cameras, and that's how we always found the keys. There was an old man in that home. He died before I started working there. I would see him every night walking down the hall from his room. When he'd cross the threshold into the dining room, he would step very high, as if there was a large step there. It drove me nuts. So finally I asked some of the aides, who had been there a long time. I described him to them, and they laughed and said, "Oh yeah, we know him." I sometimes believe that they stayed there because they had no other lives besides that building. Most of them had came from the state hospital that had closed, and the staff was really their only family left. Was it just energy? Or were we the only ones that were there for them in life? So they stayed with us in death. Story 2. Ghostly Child. I used to work the late shift at a movie theater. Theater number 9 had a ghost. A little girl around 3 years old with long curly blonde hair. She wore this frilly blue dress The story is that her parents killed her on the side, way back at the turn of the century, and that she was scared to go into the afterlife because she was afraid her parents were there, waiting for her. There's really no explanation for it, and most people don't believe me, but I've seen her. Theater number 9 is always so cold, no matter what temperature you set the thermostat on. One night, my boyfriend and I went to see a movie in Theater 9, and my right hand was so cold the whole time. I think she was holding my hand. One of the projection managers, who worked with me when I worked there, used to talk about this little girl all the time. He said that she liked to hang around the projector. He tried to reassure her that if she crossed over, she'd go to heaven and that she'd be protected from her parents. They couldn't get her in the afterlife. But I guess her paranormal psychotherapy wasn't working, because I know I felt her presence the last time I was there. Story 3. Shaken. I've always been able to see things and feel things that most people can't. As a child, I would often see strange shadows in my room. I'd watch them slide down under my door. I used to cover my head with a blanket and pray they'd go away. My sister and I shared a room. We had bunk beds. One particular night, we went to bed a little bit later than we usually did. About 2 a.m, I was suddenly awoken by a strange feeling. You know the one where the little hairs on the back of your neck stand up and you feel like you're being watched? I sat up. I was on the top bunk. I leaned over the bed to wake my sister. She was awake. I told her about the feeling I had. She scared very easily, so she climbed up the ladder to my bunk. It had probably been 5 minutes since she had moved when we felt the bed shake. We held on to each other, completely frozen in fear. Our bed continued to shake for a solid 10 minutes. It shook so hard that I think it might have actually left the floor for a brief period. We yelled for our parents, and they come running in. They said that we had just watched too much TV and had let our imaginations run wild. My sister and I, we decided to sleep with our parents that night. The bed shook almost nightly until we turned about 14 years old. By then, I'd gotten used to it and tended to just ignore it. My sister was different, though. She slept in the living room a lot. When we try to tell people about this, they think we're just joking, trying to scare them. When I was about 15, I told my boyfriend about it. He thought it was funny. When we were 19, he and his friend decided that they were going to spend the night at our house. We were trapped in due to a blizzard. My sister eagerly gave up our room, and me and her slept in the living room, while my boyfriend and his friend slept in our bunk beds. After I'd fallen asleep, I heard someone calling my name. It was my boyfriend, so I went to find out what he needed. I hadn't even reached the hallway yet when him and his friend came charging out of the room, knocking me over. They told me that my bed had started shaking violently. The friend even claimed that he saw glowing red eyes. They swore they would never sleep in that room again. One night my sister was going to spend the night at a friend's house. My parents were outside, saying their goodbyes. I was alone in the living room, holding my cat. It was Christmas time, so our Christmas tree was lit and up against one wall, across from our couch. While I was sitting there, I heard a crash in my parents' bedroom. I heard laughing and footsteps that seemed to be running down our hallway. My cat was freaking out in my arms, scratching me to get away. I looked up, down towards the hallway, and saw a small black creature with long ears coming into our living room, full tilt. It ran into our Christmas tree with such force that it knocked it over. I was completely stunned. I just sat there watching it, and then this creature just seemed to melt away. I would describe him as part goat, like his legs were bent, almost goat-like, but his torso was definitely human. His ears were long and bent at the top, and he had a long, pointed nose. I was recently home visiting my mom for her birthday, and while there I was chatting up my neighbor, Barb. And I told her the story of the creature I saw long ago on Christmas. It didn't surprise her. Apparently another child in the neighborhood had very recently saw the same creature peering out a window. What is it? Who is it? Story 4. Slumber Party. I was having a friend spend the night at my house. We had just got back from a movie and decided to sleep in the basement. I felt like we were being watched from the extra bedroom. When my friend looked over, she saw a face from out of the t-shirts that were hanging up to dry. We decided maybe it was better to just go to sleep. We were just about asleep at 2:30 a.m. when footsteps in the basement woke us up. At first I thought it was my dad. He gets up at odd times of the night occasionally, but then I realized that no one had come downstairs. If my dad had come downstairs, the dog would have followed him. The room, it had gotten so cold, we could almost see our breaths. My friend and I agreed that we had both looked towards the spare bedroom at the same time, and when we did, we saw a woman wearing an old, long, white dress, standing in the doorway staring at us. We decided that we would just wait it out. We figured that she would leave. She entered the room instead and sat down in a chair next to where we were sleeping on the floor. And then my friend said, "Look in the mirror." And when I did, I saw the face of the woman and a hooded man who was dark and shadowed. It was almost like he was trapped in the glass behind the mirror. We got up and we bolted for the stairs. And when we did, we heard screaming behind us, but we didn't look back. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. And if you would like to hear your story featured, send me an email at hauntedfamilypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Bye.